Good Saturday morning to everybody, and welcome to Legal Notes with Charter Oak Law Group with Marianne Charron and Ned Barron. I'm Gary Byron. Good morning, folks.
Good morning.
How are you?
Fantastic.
Today, however, we're going to talk about incapacity.
Yeah.
Specifically, incapacity, for example, to sign legal documents such as a will. So then I'm going to start with the most obvious question here, folks.
Yeah.
And we can break it. Then we can get into the weeds a little bit in a moment. But let's just start off with, when is a person actually incapable? I guess maybe from a legal perspective, legally incapable.
Yeah, because we have a layperson definition of when we think our parents are incapable. And perhaps most children think that their parents are incapable before they are actually legally incapable, right? But we do have legal definitions because, Ned and I, oftentimes we have either children or we have someone who is calling and saying, my father needs a will or need documents. And one of the first things that we have to do is determine if somebody has capacity. Mm-hmm. Are they capable or are they incapable? And so why don't you, Ned, start off with one of the things that we look for?
Well, in that instance, I mean, it's interesting that you start out by talking about where an adult child calls about their parent and says, well, my mother, father, or both need wills, either that they don't have them or they need to update them.
Right.
And we've talked about this before, and maybe we'll be talking about it in the following week about undue influence.
Yeah.
Right.
But,
okay. Why is the child calling? Right.
First thing.
That's the first question. Why is the child calling and not the parent? Because, and that's our first question. That's the first litmus test, right?
Right.
Is, well, if someone else is calling, then there's a reason for that. And what is that reason? Because the parent might be resistant to it.
Yeah.
It may be that the parent has no idea that their child is calling about it. Or it might be that the parent has some sort of diminished capacity. And that's why the child is calling. Because it's easier for them to explain what the parent needs than the parent. Or perhaps the parent.
Which is another issue.
Doesn't know what they need.
Right? So we try to figure, so we always say, well, the client is going to be your parent. We need to meet with and talk to your parent. Like, right? I mean, we get variations on that.
You mean you just can't draft the documents and then I'll have my parent sign them and everything will be good? We've gotten that.
We have. We certainly have. So, one of the things we'll kind of start off with, just because you're old doesn't mean you're incapable. I mean, Ned and I have had people well in their 90s signing documents and have demonstrated capacity. So age doesn't matter. We've had people who have been physically, and both of us have had to go to the hospital or ICUs. I've had to go to an ICU when somebody was, still conscious, but prior to pre-surgery or things like that, where they've wanted documents done. So if they have their cognition intact, we have done documents for people where they cannot physically sign their name but have to sign with an X because of some sort of diminishing capability in terms of use of their extremities, or think of somebody who might have Lou Gehrig's disease, for example, or something like that, Parkinson's. So we've seen all sorts of circumstances where we have found people to be capable, but when we talk about signs of incapability, we look for, as Ned was just saying, does a person actually know why they're talking to us, right? So why are you here? Do you know who I am? Do you know why your daughter called? You're the lawyer. Okay, that's a good start, right? We are the lawyer. Now, don't forget, if in the old days, pre-COVID days, they would drive their parent to see us. And I would have to say, Ned and I can pretty much tell pretty fast if someone's been coached en route. Okay. So you're meeting with the lawyer. You're meeting with the lawyer, Mom. You're meeting with the lawyer. So, do you know why you're here? Meeting with the lawyer, right? I mean, like, you can tell when there's a rehearsed answer.
Of course.
And then, go ahead.
Well, it's interesting in those instances where time works against the coaching. Because the more, there are a lot of people who have significantly diminished capacity, but can fake it. And they're really good at it. And we know tons of cases where a parent has fooled their family. A mother or a father who is elderly, who's not taking care of all their activities of daily living. They're not, let's say, they're not keeping their house clean. They're not keeping themselves clean, all that kind of stuff. But they have ways of working around that. They know they have the deficiencies, but they also don't know how to fix that, and they're not going to ask anyone for help. So they hide it, and so that's one thing about, we've talked about this before, I think, where they'll say, "Oh, no, don't come to my house. Let's meet at the restaurant. I really want to go to a restaurant." Or let's
come
go
pick
to your
me
house.
up. I'll come pick you up, Mom. Let's go out to lunch. I'll pick you up. So you never know. And then they'll like, "Mom, how you doing?" "I'm good. I'm feeling okay. But how are you?"
Yeah,
Tell me
right.
Tell me about my grandchild, right? And then the conversation never gets back to how mom is really doing. But when we meet with someone and the child may be initially there, but we'll have to leave, and we'll have to say, okay. So
we'll ask them to leave the room.
Right. And we'll say, so this is what we're here talking about. So let's talk about it. Do you have a will? Do you know what a will is? Do you know what powers of attorney are? Do you want them? And when you start asking very specific questions like that, they're not going to be able to say, let's talk about you. They're not going to say what's for lunch, So you can't have that social speak conversation when you're trying to talk about very specific things, or we're trying to talk about very specific things with them.
All right. So I'm curious. Would you rather, well, it's kind of a two-part question. Is your approach different when the child contacts you regarding their parent as opposed to the parent, him or herself, contacting you about themselves? Do you approach it differently, and what would you prefer?
Okay.
Well, I think in most cases I would prefer the parent to call. Because you're going to have
the actual individual who you'd be working for.
Because that's who we create the attorney-client relationship with, is with them.
Okay, so, and I'll give you all the time you need, but I'm just saying, so you'd rather have a lucid parent.
Lucid is the key.
Yes. Contact you.
Yeah.
More than that same individual now having maybe the onset of some dementia or losing some cognitive
right. So if the child calls, there's circumstances, a child or a spouse. Sometimes you have a spouse call, right?
Sure.
So you have someone other than the person.
Okay.
And so do we prefer speaking directly to an individual? Yes. Is our approach different? I don't know if the approach is necessarily different. We just have to filter out and try our best to filter out what the motivation is. Okay. And, I think I had given the example of someone who has Lou Gehrig's disease or Parkinson's. Mm-hmm. So I've had a child or a spouse call, and I do have to meet with them. Ned has to, meet with the individual and determine if there is cognition. I did a will recently, and I had the doctor provide me with a note that I could put in the file that the doctor had provided, and Ned and I talked about this before the show, a mini mental exam, so that I had some sort of demonstration in my file that a doctor, someone other than me, although Ned and I have done this for so long, we can pretty much tell when someone is capable or not, okay? And so that we have that note in the file. So my client, my patient is treated for X, Y, and Z. This is the reason why they, sometimes seem to have forgetfulness, but I know that this part, I've just met with them. I know that they understand, you know what I mean? Like, you put something in the file, we call it papering the file, but having something in there so that we are extremely comfortable. And if there's any doubt, then we have something that we can point to. But so do you asked if we treat it differently. I guess we do treat it differently. Like there's more things that we have to, in our mind, play out.
Right, because there's that undue influence question if a sibling or a child is calling, right? That okay, what's their motivation for this? And thinking about this, that if you are, we keep saying parent, but if you're the client, right, the elderly client,
Yep.
and you're calling us, you had to find our name
Somewhere.
somewhere on the internet or
the show.
right, or through this great
We
show.
hope that's the
Right,
Right,
but it's their own volition.
Right. So they're the ones that went through the mental process of identifying an attorney, calling the attorney, and then calling to make an appointment to speak, to meet with the attorney. All those things take skills, right, that we take for granted.
Right.
But if you have diminished capacity, those become more difficult to do.
Yeah.
And so that's why my original answer was yes, I would rather have that, because that automatically I'm going to be
You're eliminating any motivation from a child.
Right. But also I'm also ruling out that this person is so diminished that they can't even figure out how to get an attorney or why they're calling, why they're calling an attorney.
Is there always motivation? Is that the attorney in you that just sits there? Like, what is motivating this person? Do they have dollar signs in their eyeballs? Do they, what's in it for them? I mean, and I understand that you're paid to look out for the most vulnerable.
That's exactly right.
I understand that.
Yeah. Yep.
But isn't everything we do backed by motivation? Or don't we have to be motivated to get up in the morning or to eat?
Okay, so let me
Now,
rephrase
that was a very
it.
lawyerly response to you, right?
No, but I'm being serious though.
Okay,
though
then let me rephrase
motivation is not necessarily negative.
There could be suspicious motivation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm suspicious because I guess technically
or self-serving
you're
motivation.
right. There's motivation for everything. Okay, so then I'm suspicious as far as what provoked this person to contact us regarding. Is that fair to ask?
Regarding their
Absolutely.
parent, you're saying, right? If a child is calling.
Yeah.
Either way, I think I had mentioned this on another show. Probably the first question I ask when I meet with someone is, why are you coming? Why are you coming here now? Like, what happened? Was there something that happened? And so I always ask, and the motivation can be, I just had my best friend die, and I realized that I need to do something. I promised myself I would do it this year. I mean, like, so the motivation can be very good, or I've had people say, my daughter told me I have to do this.
Or my son told me he wants me to transfer the house to him.
Yes. And then we're like, okay.
Yeah, definitely have had that.
We've had that. We have definitely had that.
Is it better to have all children involved? If someone's going to make an appointment with you for their parent
That's
or
a good
parents,
question. That's a really good question.
do you bring all the kids together and say, let's go in together? Or does somebody say, you know what, I can't, I'm too busy, or it's just too emotional for me, or I'm out of state, I can't catch a flight. You go. Is it better to have one or two or all the siblings together for this?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And of course the lawyerly answer is it depends. The benefit, right? So there's so many issues regarding your question. One of them is that we do have a attorney-client relationship, and there's confidentiality built into that.
Yes.
And that we have to keep what our clients tell us confidential and all that. And when you start bringing in children, whether it's one or all four of them,
right,
that starts to erode that potentially erode that confidentiality, and so your client has to be totally on board with any of their children being involved with the process. So putting that aside,
right,
one of the questions that I always ask when there's one child who's helping a parent through this process,
yep,
and that is how many children do you have, and where are the other children, and are they aware of this, that you're going through this process?
Are they aware?
Right? Are they on board with, especially if there's going to be an unequal distribution of assets, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, we've had cases where one child comes in and
what?
And the parent saying, yes, I have 4 children, but I want to leave everything to the child that brought me in. Then the question is,
and
okay,
sometimes that's legitimate.
Well, sure. But the question is, well, then why are you doing that? Why are you excluding your other children?
Yes.
Can you tell me what your motivation is for that? And they may
articulate
exactly say, this child has been taking helping
care of me. Right.
They're there every day. They're doing my grocery shopping. They're taking me to every doctor's appointment. They are doing everything for me. And my other 3 kids, they don't even call me. Right? They don't. They have no involvement in my life except when it comes to money. Like they'll call me up and say, "Hey, Mom, Dad, can I borrow some money?" Or
they call for Christmas,
right?
Or a birthday, and that's it. So, but you're right. There might be one child, and there generally in families. We talked about this. It's like sometimes there's always one. Right, who ends up having to carry the bags and do all of it, and the other children are, for whatever reason, just not around.
So you totally neglect them completely, or can you ration it out differently? Where you go, maybe this person gets the bulk, but I'm still going to give my other children something. Folks, you are listening to Legal Notes with Mary Ann Charron and Ned Barron. From Charter Oak Law Group, you can contact them quite easily at charteroaklaw.com. Once again, charteroaklaw.com. And by the way, they've got a phone number, 860-570-1229. Of course you have a phone number. That was kind of funny. Yes, write this phone number down, 860-570-1229. Sorry, go ahead.
So the thing is, when you have a child who has been providing a lot of care and support, sometimes they are very altruistic about doing it. And other times, Ned and I don't know. I've had this. I think you have had this too, Ned. I actually had a child who was taking care of the parents, put the ringer on the phone silent. So when the other children try to call, it's like, gee, no one's calling. So I found this out because I was asking the person for whom I was conservator, court appointed me conservator. And Agnes was her name. And I was like, Agnes, do you need a new phone? Because, and I'm like talking loud to her because the numbers are really small. Can you see these numbers? Do you know? And she said, the phone doesn't work. I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, it doesn't, no one ever calls me. I found out that the caregiver, in this case was a caregiver, was a caregiver child, actually had the phone on silent. So there wasn't going to be anybody who called her. So here I was just checking to see if what was going on. Yeah. Do I need to do this for you? And so sometimes you just have the one kid who happens to be close by who is just more willing to take care of mom and dad. And other times you do have a less than altruistic motive.
What about gifting?
So
is the standard the same?
Well, do you want to, we didn't even actually talk about the actual definition, but gifting is similar. in the sense that, so whenever someone wants to do a will, okay, you ask them certain questions. Why do they understand the significance of their actions? Do they even know what they have to give away? All right. Do they understand the significance of giving it to only one child and not the other children? Mm-hmm. Right. So those are all elements of capacity. So for gifting, it's, do you know the significance of giving this away now is going to have on you? So you're giving your child this bank account. Do you understand that means you will have no cash, no money? Right?
Nothing to leave your other children.
Nothing to leave your other children. Okay.
Yeah.
But if they can't work their own accounts, their own checkbook, then maybe they need to relinquish that responsibility.
That's true.
But in a way, so in Connecticut, mm-hmm. if you add somebody on, let's say a child, let's say you're older and you want some help with your finances. Mm-hmm. and you have a child who's nearby who's been helping you out with other things. One way to do that, or one way that people do that, is they put their child on as a co-owner on that account. And the ramification and the ramification of that is that at the death of the person who originally owned that account, that now that surviving co-owner is presumed to be the 100% owner of that account now, as opposed to having someone added onto account for convenience purposes only.
That's correct.
And there's a distinction. And so if anyone goes to the bank to add someone onto their account to help them, they need to know that there's that distinction. And sometimes the bank's not going to, the bank representative is not going to tell them that there's that distinction. Sometimes they might, but with all areas, that training isn't always. Someone might be brand new and they've never done that before, and they might just say, "Okay, you want them on as a
Yeah, I just want to add my daughter as on the account,
right?
And someone goes, "Okay, I'll do it," as opposed to knowing that there is a distinction. You have an option: add them as a co-owner, or add them for the purpose of, just having check writing authority for convenience only.
I would imagine that it's, when you're lucid and you're aging, that you sit down with all of your children and explain what you're going to do and how you're rationing, your possessions, your money.
Well, in a parent-child dynamic, where they are good communicators, right?
Right.
That would happen. But I would have to say that a lot of parents are pretty private about their finances.
Yeah, I think that's pretty rare. Right? That's a pretty rare situation, which it makes a lot of sense. But, you think about it. Do you want to tell your kids about all the money that they're going to receive someday, or how little money they're going to receive someday?
Or conversely, how little.
And think about human emotion and motivations. You're getting back to, you would raise motivation. Some kids might be like, wow,
I didn't know you had that much, Dad.
Exactly. or
really?
Some might said, that's it.
But I'd rather have my mom or my dad. There's no amount of money that.
Yeah, of course.
You would, Gary, but
I know.
Not everyone.
I guess I try to live in a perfect world, I guess,
Right?
Yeah. I was thinking about another example of a child who brings a parent in for.
Go ahead.
I've only got about a minute, though, so go ahead.
Well, it's just really quick. And I was going to ask Marianne, have you ever had a child of a client fly in from California or some other state and then bring their parent to an attorney?
We have.
Yeah.
We have.
Certainly, this family member, there's local siblings who've been taking care of the parent. Some sibling flies in from California or wherever they live and swoops in, brings them to an attorney, has them draw up
Boy, it's competitive. It's like, who's going to, it's the race to be first.
Sometimes,
you
hate to say that, but that's very true.
Yeah. It all goes right back to what motivates you. And sadly, the almighty dollar motivates people.
Oftentimes, so yeah. But it's a tough decision in terms of being able to assess capacity. Oftentimes, children fall into two camps. They think their parent is less capable, or they are in denial and they think their parent is more capable than they really are.
Folks, there is a book called Trial and Heirs, Heirs. It's written by Andrew Mayoris and his wife Danielle Mayoris. It's about celebrity estate planning. This sounds like a pretty entertaining book. This battles it shines a light on the importance of having an estate plan. I finally got it out there.
There you go.
The first 3 people to write to us and give us feedback, not only about the show, but also that you want a copy of this book and hopefully ask a question, you're going to receive a free copy of this book. Make sure that in your email you give us your full name and address so that we can ship the book directly to you. Now, of course, you're waiting for the address, right? I knew you were.
Yep, you can email or they can call. Just know that we won't be there this morning.
Email the show at legalnotes@charteroaklaw.com. Once again, legalnotes@charteroaklaw.com. Not only for a copy of that book, but also to reach both Marianne and Ned if you've got a personal question that you'd like to ask, or who knows, if you'd like to make an appointment. The phone number, which you can also use to obtain that free book, is 860-570-1229. Again, for the book and to make an appointment, or just ask the question, 860-570-1229. For Mary Ann Charron and Ned Barron from Charter Oak Law Group, I'm Gary Byron. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, have a good one, everybody.